Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Finding the Inner Strength podcast with myself, Cheryl. And we're on episode 3 of this journey of self discovery and kind of opening myself up to all of you and giving you a space to kind of just see if there's any relevance or, I don't know, you can find commonality in what I'm sharing, or just a space to kind of get lost in someone talking. So last week, I had part 1 of a kind of like a little history on my character, my personality, kind of my mental health. And today will be part 2 of that. And we did stop, or I should say, I stopped um, in episode 2, where we had moved to Cochrane, Alberta, back in 2021. And it was funny, through the week, I was reflecting on kind of what I shared. And I had a few comments coming through, texts from friends and people listening to the podcast. And I didn't realize, I think I did know that's so I did realize, but how people can relate to some of the stuff that I experienced and went through when I was younger. And so it was funny, through this week, I remembered, I think I remember in the last episode, I was like, okay, it all kind of started turning when I got to Yellowknife, kind of like that self-doubt, that inner voice. There was a little bit when I was younger with the, as Cole's notes on being told to be quiet, but the other way, like shut up and stuff, when I was a child. And so, yeah, if you didn't listen to episode 2, go back and listen to that first and then come back to this one. And anyways, through this past week, I realized there were a few times before Yellowknife, I would say, that this kind of form of sadness was starting, or these little self reflective voices in my head, but not the positive ones, not the good friend. It was kind of the bad friend moving in. And I remembered that back, I'd say it a little bit when we were living in Gibbons, Alberta, where I had maybe a couple of times of questioning and if I was worthy of doing something or had the qualifications, or and a lot within teaching piano. But I always had such a great relationship with my students. Oh, my students were absolutely fantastic throughout the years that I taught. I taught piano from 2006 to, it was right before we moved. I think the last year I taught was 2021. Yeah, I finally broke down and was like, I need to stop. Mentally, I wasn't happy teaching anymore. Anyways, we'll go back a little bit there in Gibbons, Alberta. I think there was a couple of times where, I'm sure there was a few of us that did this as a mom or a dad. But when you're raising kids and like when there's those tough times, and you really doubt yourself as a parent, and if you're doing right by your child, or does the child appreciate you? And I think that's human. Like, I know some people are like, well, you're the parent, your kids will always love you, and kids don't really express sometimes what we want to hear as parents. And I don't think it's selfish. I think I put so much of myself into my relationships with my kids. and my husband and friendships that it's really hard sometimes to feel appreciated. And I think that's a normal human want is you put all this energy in and you have the satisfaction eventually of seeing people grow, develop, um, successes. Um, but I know there was a few times that I just felt that I wasn't being seen as a mom. Also as a wife, like I felt very, I want to say isolated, but it wasn't isolated. It almost like all this energy I was giving to keep everything afloat. Everything like, you know, making sure everyone was getting what they needed um, from me as a mom and a wife, but also keeping the schedule sorted, making sure finances were okay. Like, let's be honest, they weren't always okay. And just this pressure of trying to be content with the choice I made years ago of being a stay at home mom. And sometimes it just felt like, was I the right mom for them? And like I said, I think that's a genuine, natural feeling as a parent because we're passing on to them our experiences, our, I'll call it wisdom, kind of like what we went through growing up. And it's hard sometimes when they just don't want to listen. So I know there was a few times where maybe, no, it wouldn't have been Gibbons. It would have been going up to Yellowknife now, like, or not now, but the next part of being posted to Gibbons. We're in Gibbons from 2010 to 2014. And then we got the posting up to Yellowknife. And before that posting, I actually homeschooled my kids for 3 years. And the reason being, my oldest just struggled academically in a classroom, and he was just by grade 4 shutting down. And yeah, as a parent, made that decision to homeschool because I didn't want him to lose sight that he was extremely intelligent on so many different levels. And a classroom isn't always the best environment for learning for a lot of people. And when I decided to homeschool him back in Gibbons, um, I gave my daughter the choice too, who wasn't struggling academically, if she wanted to be homeschooled, and she wanted to be homeschooled. And so we did that. And our my daughter and I learned that we are like oil and water, but also because we're a lot alike. And we had a lot of moments where our relationship felt very shaky. And I think that was also around just not feeling like I was doing a great job as a mom. Because it is a job, it is fulfilling job most of the time. Let's be honest. We have moments as parents where we feel like we haven't done enough for our children. So when we moved to Yellowknife for that posting in 2014, and what I mean by posting, if this is your first episode you're listening to, we were a military family. So we took a posting up to Yellowknife, Northwest Territories, not the Yukon. They're two different. It's funny when you say Yellowknife, people get it mixed up with the Yukon, and it's not. It's the Northwest Territories. Um, at that point, my son wanted to go back into regular school because he wanted to do school sports. And I thought, I was like, fair enough. Like my kids always played hockey, ringette, there was lacrosse. When they were little, there was soccer. We always said we wanted our kids to have at least one sport. And if they wanted an art, like music or art um, based interest through when they were growing up. We didn't want to shut them out from interests. Um, so, of course, God love him. We moved to Yellowknife, and when he went back into school, it's what we expected. He just learns not in a great way of being in the classroom with a group discussion, and um, it was hard to watch because I didn't want him to lose that knowing and how brilliant he is. And then my daughter was, she really excelled in a classroom where when we homeschooled, it's actually kind of cool when I homeschooled her because she was always a top student up until I started homeschooling her, which maybe that's a problem. But what it was she was really good at hiding from teachers. She was struggling. And man, I remember her telling me when first time I was homeschooling her, I'm like, man, you excelled in math, like in a subject, like in grade 3, like you always had all these high marks and blah, blah. She's like, Mom, I just waited for them to put the answer on the board and then I would put it in my book because they didn't realize I was struggling. They were so focused on everyone else. So I didn't want them to know I was struggling. I'm like, oh, well, that's kind of brilliant. So, anyways, so what I noticed when I homeschooled her, there was like little holes missing on what she was missing within an academic learning space. So, okay, back to Yellowknife. Sorry, I do tend to go sometimes back and forth. So we moved to Yellowknife, and like I had said in my last podcast, that's when I really started to decline on my mental health. And again, not realizing it at the time. But it's funny, like this past week, I remembered, I forgot to share with you, and I don't mind sharing it. I actually questioned buying a plane ticket and leaving my family. And it was just because I felt like I wasn't being seen. I was putting all this energy into loving my kids at that time, teenagers, loving my husband at that time, really struggling for himself on his own, um, things happening through his career of the military. And I just, I felt like they didn't need me. I was like, well, if I just disappear, they'll probably be better off. And I don't mean as in disappear, hurt myself, as in just leave, because I felt like no matter what I said or did, there was no appreciation. There was like points. And I guess I was raised when it came to holidays, birthdays, you always got somebody something like so, and I don't mean everybody, I mean my parents, and my parents giving to us, my grandparents giving to us, me and my sister is what I'm saying at this point. And just that being taught the appreciation of just showing that love on that special day. And there were a few times over the years where there just was nothing. And I never asked for much. Like I was very easy, like Mother's Day. I'm like, I just want to go to a greenhouse, pick out some plants and, create a little garden, which was a little hard in Yellowknife because shorter season. But you could even I could just buy some flowers and some pots um, or even just spending the day with me. This was the most um, I was looking for sometimes. And when my kids were in high school, it was like they didn't care. And I get it. Hormones, life, they were going through their own things. And my husband was going through stuff, and he just saw me moments where I was just hurting and just crying in the shower because I didn't want them to see how devastated I was. of how I was feeling, like of not being appreciated, even just for one special day. It's like it didn't matter. And yeah, like I just wanted to go. I wanted to leave. But then there was a voice in my head like, no, like you can't do that. And glad I listened to that voice, because I wish I knew then I was already struggling with self confidence, self esteem. Um, there was just something going on for myself. I was always trying to keep the picture pretty for everybody else. I'm I always love helping people and giving them connection, a space to just share how they're feeling. I'm not a qualified therapist at all, but sometimes people just need a space to feel heard. Um, and sometimes when I would share what I was feeling, people would be shocked because they would always like, well, you're so confident and you just seem so happy. And we're just really good. We're really good at putting a mask on and people not seeing us for who we truly are, but we're hiding that is what I mean. We feel like we have to put this barrier up and protect ourselves individually. Um, so our kids and our spouses aren't really seen, and our friends and just everyday people seeing that, we're hurting. And I mean me. So anyways, fast forward now. That's what I just wanted to share. There were some moments um, where I struggled as a mom, as a wife. So then we moved to Cochrane 2021, and all of us, well, sorry, not all of us. My son moved down with us. Our daughter technically moved with us, but she went to university on Vancouver Island. And I was like, okay, this is great. It's a change of scenery. And I realized when I got to Cochrane in Alberta, I didn't know how to look up and look people in the eye and say hello. That was a norm for me before going to Yellowknife. Like I always wanted people to feel seen, feel heard, and not because I felt like I had to. I just know how it feels to be seen and heard. And a smile, um, that's just, I don't know, it's the most heartwarming thing to have someone say hello and smile. And sometimes you just don't know what people are going through. And just that one hello and smile can make the difference in the world to someone's day. So that's when we moved to Cochrane. And I was like, oh, I don't know how to look up and look at people in the eye. Like I didn't know what to do. I was like, this is definitely not me. And I think that's when I start one of the moments where I really realized that I had lost myself or something was going on. Again, was this hormonal? Was this something through the years that compiled to have this happen? And I was like, this isn't who I am. And I made it a point. It was so hard at first. Every time walking our dogs, um, making sure I was saying hello to everybody, and not in a creepy way. People that know me, people who are listening to this know me. Um, I just love saying hi to people and talking to people. And when I say that, I think that was one of the first times. I think one of the first times where I realized, okay, something's going on was actually in Yellowknife, the day that I realized I couldn't teach piano anymore. Sorry, I'm going back a year or so. I probably right within that same year. So before the move, I remember I was at my osteo massage appointment and I was like, I couldn't relax the whole session. And I was actually apologizing to her. She's fantastic. If you're ever in Yellowknife, Samantha Marriott, osteopath, fantastic. Anyways, I couldn't relax. My body was in just sympathetic nervous system. Like it was just would not let go. It was just fight or flight. I just wouldn't let her in. Like with a single touch, I was like, this, I don't know what's going on. I even told her, I'm like, I don't know what's going on. And by the time I left there, I was crying because I realized I had to let go of teaching piano. There was a point where I was like, I just broke because I felt like there wasn't that bad friend voice in my head saying I wasn't doing a good enough job. And and I just didn't feel that I was worthy to teach these kids piano. Yeah. So that would have been maybe one of the first or second times I was cracking down, literally. So moved to Cochrane, get settled in. Beautiful little townhouse. Had an amazing neighbor, Emma, absolutely fantastic. And I eventually started teaching yoga in Cochrane. I gave myself a few months, probably more like we got there in August, but really settled in more in September. And by March, I finally got the courage to go to a yoga studio there, and realized I really enjoyed the space. And I spoke to the owner, and she was just a gem, absolute gem. And I said, "Hey, this is who I am. These are my qualifications. I would love to be part of your community." And right on, she hired me to, or contracted me to teach a couple classes. And I started meeting some amazing, amazing people and made some dear friends. You know who you are, in Cochrane, and reconnected with some other friends that happened to live in Calgary. And I started being myself to a point. I felt happy. I felt light. Um, Felt successful. Uh, yeah, it was good. But there were still moments where I was worried about my son. Like, he was working, but he just wasn't very happy. Worried about my husband, with his own mental health journey and physical journey. So at this point, he's retired from the military. Uh, he was medically released when we were still up in Yellowknife. And I felt like I was walking on eggshells to keep them happy. How could I invest my time into them to make sure they were healthy and getting what they needed, to see and learn how amazing they are and how successful they are? And again, at this point, our daughter is on Vancouver Island, for university. So Ken went away. That's my husband. Went away to Fiji for a couple of months. He's like, "You need to go do something." And this was in 2022. So by that point, I'm teaching at two places for yoga. My son has moved to Edmonton to be with his now fiance, and our daughter is trying to figure out where she needs to be because she realized university was not her cup of tea, which is totally fine. And Ken went to Fiji, and so that Christmas was the first Christmas I hadn't been with my husband in years. Even on his tours, he was home. He served overseas for 4 tours in his 23, 24-year career. So, and that was a really hard Christmas because, again, I had that feeling of just not being appreciated. And both kids were home for Christmas. And even Ty's now fiance was there for Christmas. That was when they got engaged, actually, on Christmas Eve. Christmas Eve? Yeah, Christmas Eve. But if we get home and I'm by myself, they were both all in their rooms, and I just felt so alone and not appreciated. Like, they just didn't want to spend time with me. And it was funny because I really don't think they realized what they were doing. But yeah. And then even on Christmas Day, I was by myself cooking Christmas dinner. I was really missing Ken, like, because we've been together since I was 15. He was 16, and all of a sudden he's gone. But it was good that he was gone because we also down the road want to have a sailboat. That's a whole other discussion. So he was on a sailboat for over 2 months with this family, getting it ready to sail from Fiji. They're actually in Indonesia right now, but Ken actually helped them with work and projects on the boat to get it ready. And he, I just that Christmas and New Year's was lonely because my best friend wasn't there, and my kids for Christmas alone just didn't realize how impactful or how much of an impact it was for me, feeling like they didn't want to be with me. I felt like they were there just out of, what do you call it? Obligation. And I'm sorry if they're listening to this. I think I talked to Ty. It was Boxing Day, I think, because I was very quiet. And he was driving me to pick up, I was getting some work done on the truck, and he drove me to go pick it up. And he's like, "Why are you so quiet?" I'm like, "I just don't want to talk about it because I don't want to be that mom, right? And be like, you hurt my feelings." And I'm pretty sure I opened up to him that I just didn't feel seen. And then, of course, that he went, I should have known better. I was like, "Don't you say it to Kaylin or Maddie." Like this, oh, Kaylin's his fiance. But anyways, I said, "It's just how I feel. I really miss your dad. And I don't think you guys realize how much of an impact it was. You just not spending time with me." And wasn't going to go up to the rooms and say, "Hey, come spend time with me." I don't like people feeling forced to spend time with me. I want them to want to spend time with me. So, yeah, that's kind of like my pity party. It was a pity party. But that night Ty had them, they all came, played games, and it was nice, but it was also, when you tell somebody you have a problem with them, or like if you had an issue and you want to talk to them about it, and all of a sudden they're there after you have the conversation, but then you feel it's forced. So it was really nice to have a night of games or whatever, but it didn't, to a point fully, it didn't feel genuine, because I knew I just had that conversation with my son that afternoon and was like, you don't realize kind of where I'm at right now, with how I'm feeling. And then I was always that mom trying to hide my feelings and emotions so I could focus in on the kids and my husband. So after Ken got back from Fiji, which would have been January 2022, it was really good for him because on that boat they had a child and a dog. And Ken just said, if we're going to be on a boat, he didn't want to do it with our two dogs. And fair enough, because it's hard, right? And our dogs, I think that transition onto a boat right away would have been hard, because they were getting older. And yeah, so we'd made the decision not to get a sailboat right away. And that's when I was like, oh, wait, that would have been 22. That would have been January 23. And I looked at Ken and I was like, because I knew he wasn't getting fulfillment of just being in Cochrane. He was getting to the gym. He didn't really connect with, like, make any new friends. He was kind of hiding out on people. And I was like, okay, that's it. We need to get moving. Like, we love to travel together. He's retired. In my mind at that time, I can take yoga wherever we go. We're going to sell the house and get an RV. And that's what we did. We sold our house, got an RV, and started living nomadically at the end of July 2023. So we've been doing this for over a year, and there have been ups and downs. And that's why, and ups and downs, not as in not wanting to travel together. We absolutely flourish traveling together. It was kind of more me realizing on these travels, I was struggling even more with something going on with my mind. And I would just have these crashes of being down, wanting to just hide from people, and not realizing what it was. Just you would wake up, or I'd wake up, and all of a sudden I feel lost, disconnected. And um, yeah, it was that brings us like when we were in actually, yeah, Arizona last winter, so winter of 23, 24. um we were at this one resort, and it's kind of funny because like it was a 55 plus resort, and we were like, oh, we definitely want to go to somewhere like that because we just wanted to have a little bit of separation from littles, like kids and stuff, and thought this would be a great environment. And we met a few lovely people at the specific RV resort, but the majority, it was kind of funny. I was like, I don't get it. I feel like just like this really weird energy towards me. And Ken was like, I don't know. Like, I don't think so. I'm like, no, there's something weird. Like, there's something doesn't feel right. I feel like I'm being judged. I don't know why, but and even that voice in my head, like, no, you are. So then I started questioning myself, and I actually started reverting back to how I was like in Yellowknife, and I was hiding out, didn't want to leave the RV only if we were driving somewhere to go for a hike. And fast forward to the end of that stay of 20, we left that resort on January 2nd, 2024. But before we left, I actually had a few ladies ask me one day, and it's a couple of these ladies I've been talking to, not daily, but whenever I would take the dogs to the dog park and we'd be chatting. And this one lady comes in one day, and probably a couple of days before we're leaving the resort. So we've been there for 2 months. And she's like, okay, I just need to ask you, how old are you? So remember, this is a 55 plus resort. And I was 45 at the time. I'm like, I'm 45. She's like, oh. And then the other two ladies like, oh, we all thought you were in your 30s. So they were all, not all the ladies, because I met some really lovely people, but they judged me because of thinking I was younger and I should not have been at this RV resort. They didn't want to have anything to do with me. They didn't give me the chance, day and time to learn who I was. And I was like, I could feel, and it was like funny. Like I told Ken, and he's like, oh my God, you were right. And I actually met another girl who had been going to that resort for, it was our 5th year. And we just met the day before Ken and I left that resort. And she said that it was the worst year that she was there. She knew she had a legal right to be there because she looked into it, and she was 43, and never that year, um, just people were not nice to her. Female people. The men were nice, more open arms, and but just that environment alone brought me back to hiding away from society in my neighborhood. I'll call it that. In that neighborhood, I just didn't know how to talk to people. I got quiet. My head started going down, and yeah, it was heavy. So that's, hey, we've gotten to like 30 some minutes. I'm gonna sign off for now on this episode, part 2 on my mental health journey. Um, and we'll continue next week. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Also, this is being released around November 11th, Remembrance Day here in Canada, Veterans Day in United States. And I just wanted to say happy Remembrance Day. Please take the time. Please, I'm asking to even just reflect on the sacrifices that our men and women have done for us for so long. The reason Remembrance Day started, why it's still on the calendar now. I honestly don't understand why even the mornings are closed in a lot of businesses just for people to reflect, because I think people are forgetting, unfortunately. I'm not saying everybody, but I think people are forgetting why this day is an annual day of remembrance, why it's important to take that time, and realizing, yes, they fought for our democracy, for our freedom, but nothing says that you can't give a minute or two or an hour to appreciate and take that time to remember all those sacrifices, ways being away from their families. Some of them didn't make it home. Um, yeah, please take that time. It's one thing I do ask. Have a fantastic week. Have a fantastic day. I forgot to should have said that first. Fantastic day, fantastic week, fantastic month. And I'll chat with you next time.